Tonight on News 5 Live, Doug Singh steps down as chairman of the SSB following a leaked recording of an interview. COVID relief program to begin disbursements through the SSB. The number of confirmed cases of COVID-19 in Belize doubles over the Easter weekend. Of the 18 positive cases, Conrad Everett becomes the second casualty, setting off the closure of a private health facility, a supermarket and a bank. KHMH Workers Union meets with Prime Minister Dean Barrow. The union requests a thorough investigation into breach of protocols regarding the admission of patient 10 to the hospital. The Ministry of Health to procure test kits from the Cayman Islands. And we'll tell you about the support that organizations are providing to the public during the COVID-19 crisis. Details of these stories and more coming up in tonight's newscast. Good evening. Welcome to News 5 Live for Tuesday, April 14th. I am Marlene Cuellar. Late this evening, Chairman of the Social Security Board, Doug Singh, stepped down from the post. The consummate UDP insider also resigned as the chairman of the Elections and Boundaries Commission and as a director of BTL. His letter of resignation is addressed to Prime Minister Dean Barrow, thanking him for offering the opportunity to serve. Now, Singh gave an interview to Belize Breaking News, but did not know that he was being recorded when he spoke to Aaron Humes. That recording was apparently leaked and it went viral on social media. Singh is heard using expletives and making unsavory comments about the disbursement of the COVID-19 relief funds that are being dispersed through the SSB. Within hours, he is clearing his desk and stepping down from his job at SSB and other boards. We're not releasing the audio because it wasn't provided to this organization. The number of persons infected by COVID-19 doubled over the Easter weekend. As of this afternoon, 629 persons have been tested. Of that amount, 18 persons are positive. Notably, so far, the Orange Walk, Stan Creek, and Toledo districts have not reported any confirmed case, but the Belize district accounts for most of the persons carrying the virus. Of the 18 cases, 2 men have died. The latest victim is retired BDF mechanic Conrad Everett, and a number of his family members are in a cluster who have tested positive. But there is a much wider group of persons who attended a party along with Conrad. News 5's Isani Caetano reports.
Another casualty of coronavirus disease 2019 has been recorded by the Ministry of Health. Conrad Everett, a resident of Belize City, is the second victim to have lost his battle with the highly infectious contagion. The affirmative test result for the 63-year-old came from a batch of 30 samples that were analyzed on Holy Thursday. However, Everett had been swabbed twice before while hospitalized at the Belize Healthcare Partners Limited.
He had an initial diagnosis of community-acquired pneumonia, and he was there till March 30th, which is when we understand he self-discharged himself from the institution, returned on March 31st with respiratory distress. He was intubated on March 31st at Healthcare Partners Limited, and he remained intubated there for 1 week before he was transferred to Karl Huchner.
That was on April 7th. Everett arrived at the KHMH with a tube inserted in his windpipe to provide his lungs with oxygen. He was immediately admitted to the intensive care unit. Of note is that Everett had been placed on a ventilator since admission at BHPL 8 days earlier.
He improved significantly in terms of his respiration process, and when they tried to take up the sedation on April 2nd, they realized that he had, in point of fact, a neurological condition. He had had a stroke while he had been in the induced coma, which can be a complication of being in an induced coma and prostrated in a bed. He got a CAT scan done that confirmed that he did have a stroke, and so that would have made his weaning off a ventilator a little bit much more difficult than any patient who doesn't have a complication.
The previous tests that he had undergone while at Belize Healthcare Partners were inconclusive. Upon his transfer to the Karl Huchner Memorial Hospital, specimen was once again taken from the former BATSUB employee.
He was swabbed at Karl Huchner on Thursday, April 9th. We had a preliminary screening test at around 3 p.m. and so Karl Huchner staff was alerted at that time of what the potential result would have been until we got the confirmatory test at about 9 p.m. last night.
The official announcement from the Ministry of Health came just before 6:30 a.m. on Good Friday. Less than 5.5 hours later, Everett was pronounced dead.
My fellow Belizeans, very early on this Good Friday morning, we recorded our second COVID-19 related death. I offer sincere condolences to the bereaved family. In consequence, you know that this particular case is accompanied by some nightmarish circumstances as to the exposure of many persons to the patient before he died. In the result, the overall picture clearly demonstrates the possibility of widespread transmission of the virus. To try to contain this possibility, we must act now.
While it has been reported that members of the KHMH staff who attended to Everett at the ICU were all wearing personal protective equipment, where and how he contracted the deadly virus is still being determined. Everett reportedly attended a private gathering of as many as 100 guests, including persons who visited from the United States at Plaza Diner on the night of March 14th.
In the case number 10, that's the one that we have identified at least 4 other persons that are positive, and that's what we call an active cluster, because that has produced 5 cases linked to one case. So that's why it's called an active cluster, because we're trying to identify all other potential cases that are linked to that one single case.
It is believed that those 5 patients linked to Everett include his wife and daughter, both employees of James Brody and Company Limited on Albert Street. That department store has since been closed for business while a decontamination exercise is carried out. Another of Everett's daughters works at Scotiabank, also on Albert Street. That financial institution was disinfected on Easter Sunday. Meanwhile, Belize Healthcare Partners remains closed until April 15th, notwithstanding the fact that its employees have also tested negative for COVID-19 after attending to Everett. The contact tracing for those infected in his family continues. Reporting for News 5, I am Isani Cayetano.
The burial of Conrad Everett took place over the weekend in line with protocols established by the World Health Organization. Now, the cluster of persons that also tested positive includes family members who worked at different establishments. The Belize Healthcare Partners, where he was first hospitalized, closed and is to reopen on Wednesday. In the downtown area, Brody's Supermarket also closed temporarily, and so did Scotiabank downtown. These establishments are also undergoing fumigation. In the following story, News 5's Isani Cayetano discusses the process of fumigation.
Decontaminating public spaces, businesses, and residential properties are services that are presently in demand amid the coronavirus emergency that Belize, as well as the rest of the world, is dealing with. Earlier today, a team of men entered the San Ignacio Town Hall compound and proceeded to disinfect it before moving on to spray nearby streets as well as stores and other shopping centers.
We would have been disinfecting Town Hall and the principal streets of San Ignacio and Santa Elena, and as well we'll be disinfecting in front of all the different supermarkets where people would traverse on a daily basis. In doing this, we are trying to, like I said, clean the area that people with the virus may have passed.
It's a similar exercise that took place in downtown Belize City over the weekend, where Scotiabank was properly sanitized after it had been discovered that the daughter of a COVID-19 patient who succumbed to the virus on Good Friday had been working. To do the job, chemical specialties were called in.
Everybody has to do a part to try to combat this COVID-19. Everybody has a play or a role to do something to combat this COVID-19. It's not just left under the Ministry of Health to do something or the government to do something. It takes I think it's the responsibility of each person, each Belizean, to do a part for this COVID-19 to be eliminated. And we know that social distancing is one, which we are doing and we are implementing, but a lot of people are not doing what is something very essential to combat this COVID-19, which is to disinfect. especially essential places.
The Twin Towns have seen the need to undertake a thorough cleansing of their streets, and according to Mayor Earl Trapp, all efforts are being done to spray the main streets at least once a week.
The least we can do is try to go in the areas where people would normally go on a daily basis and disinfect it. And we want to do this at least once a week until after this crisis is over. Hopefully, for the next month, we want to disinfect San Ignacio and Santa Elena, and of course, in front of all the supermarkets.
For chemical specialties, the demand for fumigation has increased considerably, and there is now a call for other businesses to get involved by doing their part to keep Belize clean and free of deadly pathogens.
There sure is a demand. In fact, the demand will be so great that I don't know if I will be able to. I will do what I can do, but I can tell you this. I mean, there is a demand, and there, like I said, we have to have this service available out there, and not expect just the Ministry of Health or government to provide this disinfection process. That's why I believe that the private sector, everybody that's into business, any entrepreneur should change or diversify their way of doing business, especially to suit the different changes that are occurring, especially these fast changes that are occurring in our business community.
Reporting for News 5, I am Isana Cayetano.
This afternoon, Director of Health Services Dr. Marvin Manzanero provided an update on the positive cases of COVID-19. Speaking on Ask the Experts, Dr. Manzanero says that so far there are 2 clusters, each involving the 2 casualties, Everett as well as Hubert Pipersburg, who died a week ago. In the case of Everett, the ground zero is believed to be a party on March 14th, at which time a state of emergency was not in place, but persons were discouraged from attending mass gatherings.
As you would all know, we have 18 confirmed cases, 9 males and 9 females, and we had mentioned in our last release that we were particularly following 2 specific clusters, and clusters simply refers to a group around a particular case that we have identified. So for Belize City, it's one that has identified a total of 5 cases, and there's one in San Ignacio that we have managed to link 2 initial cases that have given us a total of also 5 cases. So that's the 2 clusters that we are actively following, and I say actively because we are anticipating that we can potentially have more persons that could turn out positive from those 2 particular clusters. You will note also that we had suggested that based on evidence that's evolving, that quarantine should go from an initial, we had said 14 days to a total of 21 days now. If you notice the last press release, we had highlighted we are tying this particular last cluster to a social activity that involved preliminary data suggests up to 100 people, and even though that happened a month ago, we're still going to be looking for symptomatic patients. And the reason why we're saying that we think that's where the potential ground zero may have been for that particular cluster is because when we identified this particular case was on March 27th, which was a Friday, which is when the patient became ill, or at least ill to warrant being hospitalized in a private sector. So when you trace back the previous 14 days, then you go to an activity on the 14th of March that had people who had come in from the US, New York, we are now told, and that's where the potential outbreak may have happened. Understand that you're going to have asymptomatic individuals who could have gotten the patient infected, and not everybody progresses in the same way, shape, or form. And the immediate contacts of that particular patient are the ones who have now turned out to be positive, and that gives us a total number of 5 in that particular case. Out of these 18 cases, I can say that 2 are in the hospital. As you know, we have had 2 deaths associated to COVID-19, and 14 are being taken care of at home. most of these patients are virtually asymptomatic. The majority of these patients, as you would note, were simply captured because we were doing screening in the asymptomatic close contacts. The two patients that are hospitalized have progressed fairly good, and the one at Carluccio is being considered for moving out of the intensive care unit sometime this week, up to the data that I have this morning. And the patient from Corozal is also has progressed significantly, no longer requiring IV fluids, so that we may actually be considering whether this patient can be taken care of at home, since it no longer requires any hospital care.
Being the largest employer in the country, the government of Belize is looking to cut down on spending, with tens of millions of dollars in revenue being lost as the weeks go by. The government is struggling to find funds to pay public officers. Government ministries, offices, and departments have closed down, and with no revenue coming in, government is finding it difficult to keep up with expenses, specifically the salary of thousands of public officers, including teachers and the security forces. Salaries for the first part of April were not paid out as initially scheduled. The Public Service Union, the Belize National Teachers Union, and the Association of Public Service Senior Managers recently sat down with the Financial Secretary to identify remedies for the financial effects of COVID-19. BNTU National President Elena Smith says that discussion held involved cutting down on allowances, cutting contract officers, and foregoing this year's increment. Smith says nothing is finalized as yet.
Meeting as unions, we made some proposals to the Financial Secretary in terms of our members' position as it relates to the foregoing of the increment. So we made those suggestions and other ways in which the government can, maybe do some cost saving and be able to have funds available. As a result of our discussions that the suggestions that were made, the proposals that the unions put forth to the team, and those must be taken back to Prime Minister and Cabinet for them to have the final decision. And so we await that final position from the government side as it relates to the proposals that we made with regards to or in response to their proposal for some cuts in contract officers, increments, public officers increments, for going up that, and cuts in terms of allowances. The biggest concern was the fact that our members felt that the finances of the country have not been properly dealt with, they have not been managed properly, and for that reason now the government does not have sufficient funds on hand to assist those persons who have been laid off and, and to do other things that we need to do at this time.
Financial Secretary Joseph Wade told President Smith that the government is seeking to identify and implement potential cost-saving measures. One of those measures includes the proposed freezing of salary increments for public officers, including teachers and members of the security forces. Wade says that the government is also proposing to temporarily discontinue the monthly expense allowance received by heads of departments and senior public officers, a reduction in the gratuity payments for all contract officers, and a reduction in vacation leave for all contract officers from 30 to 20 working days are also being looked at. The Financial Secretary says that if these measures are implemented, government will save an estimated $17 million.
It was a positive meeting. I believe that the unions all appreciate the difficult circumstances we're under. They've shown a willingness to put in there, to contribute. And we're trying to just finalize the arrangement, and hopefully that we can put it into effect by the end of this month, because things are very tight. But I have to say that it was a very constructive session, and I want to thank them publicly for their understanding in the matter. Well, I think in response to one of the questions, was whether this is the only and final action and a sacrifice on the part of our staff. And I told them that, well, we can't see. The future is promised to no one. We don't know how long this will last. And while we're hoping that things will get better rapidly, we just don't know. So at this point in time, nobody can make a commitment because the fact of the matter, no one really knows the severity and the length of the problem and the challenge we have in front of us.
Financial Secretary Joseph Waite told President Smith that the government is seeking to identify and implement potential cost-saving measures. Just after he made those unsavory comments on who gets funds under the COVID relief program, Doug Singh spoke in a much saner tone to News 5. Now, one of the big issues coming out of the handling of the COVID-19 response is the Unemployment Relief Program. That program is managed by the Economic Oversight Committee that vets and approves applications and then forwards those approvals to the Social Security Board that acts as the paying agent. Well, when we left you last week, Thursday, almost 1,500 applications were approved. Chairman Singh told us via phone that an additional 5,000 applications were approved. Singh shared the status of those disbursements.
The team that is doing the approval approved around 1,400 applications last week, Thursday. Social Security received that list of approval and commenced the disbursements last week, Thursday. Of that 1,400 or so, we want to actually issue payments to the accounts of just over 1,000 of that 1,400. Those were mainly at Atlantic Bank, or dominantly at Atlantic Bank and Belize Bank. The other two banks, Heritage Bank, Scotia Bank, and credit unions, made up the balance, and those were processed on Tuesday, which is today, I believe. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the next banking day, because of course the banks closed relatively early on Thursday and did not reopen until today. So anyone who got funds over the weekend was because those funds had been posted to their accounts from last week, Thursday.
Okay. Were any other persons approved and forwarded to the SSB for there to be for payments to be disbursed?
Yes, today we received a list of just over 5,000 approved, and if those are being processed, it's possible that some may have even, of that 5,000 may have even gotten processed today. I don't have the most recent update on it, but there is, once it's approved, Social Security has access to the data, and the data is sorted in a particular way that allows us to break it down by banks. You will appreciate that many people have their facilities in different places, some with credit unions, it might be just gross credit unions, it might be like Maculata, it may vary. And once it's approved, we then have to break it out and make sure that it goes all the way to the beneficiary. So there's a bit of process. Those that we can do quickly, we need to process quickly, like what we were able to do last week, Thursday. But based on the way the process works, it's entirely possible that of that 5,000 or so that of the approval that we were given today, we would have been able to make some payments today and possibly do all the payments by tomorrow.
As an update, a press release received a short while ago says that as of 2 p.m. today, April 14th, a total of 62,706 applications have been received via the COVID-19 e-services portal, with a smaller number of hard copy applications. In addition, as of this afternoon, a total of 7,247 applications have been approved and sent to the Social Security Board for payment. The release says that, quote, another 7,500 applications are currently being processed and should be ready for approval in stages between this afternoon and tomorrow morning, unquote. Some of the concerns raised about the access to the COVID-19 unemployment relief program are the lack of bank accounts and Social Security numbers. Some groups, mostly underprivileged homes, feel that the system doesn't capture them as a result of this. We asked Singh about those persons and how they fit in. He explains why those pieces of information are required, but noted that they are still trying to iron out the details for those who don't have banking information.
The Social Security was utilized only for two purposes. One was part of the verification process as to whether or not those people were employed. That was the initial criteria that was used. And then the second part was assisted disbursement. In fact, we assisted in other ways too by collecting some manual forms, issuing and collecting manual forms. But primarily, it's the process for payment. So as far as how the criteria that were used to determine who qualifies, whether or not they were self-employed and had a Social Security number or not, is not really in the domain of Social Security. That would be based on the criteria that were used for qualifying someone. As far as the disbursement, those people without bank accounts do pose a challenge. And that is something that we're trying to work on. It is my for example, the 1,400 or so that we processed that was approved last week, we processed, as I said, just over 1,000 on Thursday, and of that, 59 were returned for invalid banking information. So either the accounts were given incorrectly, or the accounts no longer exist, or the accounts were closed, or many different reasons. But those accounts at Belize Bank and Atlantic Bank, these payments were rejected because they could not be processed. I expect that will probably be the circumstances with the new applications that were approved, the 5,000. But in addition to that, there are some people who have not put in banking information, either because they don't have some banking facility. In such cases, we're trying to assist by seeing if we can work with Heritage Bank and Bulletin Credit Union to issue debit cards to these individuals, so that we would get the card funded, get a PIN number. They will have to activate the PIN number, and then we can fund those cards with the approved amount twice a month.
Right.
So that's something we're working on, but to be honest with you, that still is in the process of being worked out. So if individuals who are approved do not have current banking facilities, it will still take a little bit for us to get this procedure up and running. I think there's been the total applications that have come into the system is over 62,000, so many of which don't have complete information, and in some cases they're duplicate applications. So those are being filtered, and if there's insufficient information, they will try to get as much as possible get back to the applicant if the applicant left valid contact details. But yes, there are a lot of the Social Security is being updated with people asking about their application, but in fact, the Social Security does not process those applications. So the inquiries are being misdirected. I believe that there were 3 numbers put out there for where there's a team that tried to assist with inquiries there. I believe they themselves are inundated too. But I just wanted to advise the public that if you're inquiring at Social Security about the status of your application, that we cannot really help. So if you're not receiving a response from the emails there, it's because we're not in a position, first of all, to respond to thousands of emails inquiring about it, and secondly, we really don't have an answer.
As we said at the start of the newscast, Singh has now resigned from the SSB following a candid interview with Belize Breaking News. Late last week, the Director of Health Services said the country and, in fact, the region is running low on viral swabs used in testing for COVID-19. This afternoon, the Office of the Prime Minister informed that test kits can be obtained from the Cayman Islands, where there is an excess of these kits. According to a release, the test kits were secured during a conversation between PM Barrow and Premier Alden McLaughlin of the Cayman Islands on April 11th. The size of the order will be determined by the Ministry of Health. During today's Ask the Experts live webcast, Director of Health Services Dr. Marvin Manzanero gave an update on the number of test kits that are currently available in country.
We have from the Roche batch 4 kits of 96, 8 kits of 96 confirmatory tests, and PAHO has sent to us last week 2,500 reactions. Reactions are kits that are being validated today for use in country, and as I understand from the PAHO country representative, we are to be getting 11,500 more reactions over the next couple of weeks. So and we're still pending 40 kits of 96 of the Roche kits that we already have in country. That's so if you do the math, that's more or less the amounts we have in country.
Coming up, the KHMH Workers Union meets with the Prime Minister. And how healthy are government coffers? We asked the Financial Secretary.
Hello, friends. I'm Dr. Bob.
The leaders of the Carl Hushna Memorial Hospital Authority's Workers Union on Monday met with Prime Minister Dean Barrow, who is now out of isolation. Since the outbreak of COVID-19, the union has been having issues with the Ministry of Health, claiming it is not well prepared to equip staff members who are being exposed to the virus at the various public hospitals. An 11-point agenda was presented to Prime Minister Barrow, and according to Vice President of the Union, Andrew Baird, there is light at the end of the tunnel because several positions were agreed upon. These include having a union representative sit on the KHMHA COVID-19 Planning Committee and for the KHMH to provide transportation to its frontline workers to and from work.
Points on the agenda was that the Correctional Workers Union must have a representative on the KHMH COVID-19 Planning Committee, and we saw that information from that planning committee was not reaching the staff any at all, and if any to the minimum. So we believe that by having a representative on that committee would make a big difference. Another point that was addressed was the transportation issue. Workers, 132 workers that work at Karishna are basically stranded, need to find ways to get to work. And the Prime Minister agreed that something must be done. And he said to us clearly, it is the responsibility of Karishna to provide that transportation needs for the staff. Whether Karishna needs to the ministry or the government, that's another thing, but Karishna must provide the means of transportation to get the frontline workers.
The Ministry of Health over the weekend said that personnel at the KHMH who were exposed to patient 10 have tested negative for COVID-19. But the KHMHA Workers Union is condemning the manner in which the administration has compromised the safety and well-being of the frontline workers. The union says certain areas of the hospital are now compromised due to direct exposure. These include the accident and emergency and the intensive care units. The union is agitating for the immediate and complete closure of the ICU unit and that inpatients be relocated elsewhere for intensive care management. Vice President Andrew Baird says that the Prime Minister agreed that an investigation into the breach of protocols need to be commissioned and persons found responsible to be held accountable.
We also presented to the Prime Minister that an investigation must be done in reference to the admission of patient 10 to Karl Hushna and then on to the other ICU where when it came positive, other patients was possibly exposed and staff of Karl Hushna were exposed. Basically, almost half the staff from the ICU unit had to be quarantined, including some from the emergency department. So the Prime Minister in himself believes that an investigation ought to be done based on what we presented, and that protocols, there must have been breaches of protocols during the admission of this patient.
Revenue to government coffers has been shrinking due to COVID-19 and the state of emergency. So, is the government broke? That is the question we asked Financial Secretary Joseph Waite today. According to Waite, large departments like the Belize Tax Services and the Customs Department collecting up to $30 million in revenue a month, and with the revenue stream going dry, the government is looking at cost-saving measures.
How much money would you say that the government has lost in terms of revenue?
Every day is, that we don't operate, we lose several, and depending on the time of month, we lose several $1 million. The estimate is that on a normal month, we get about 30 or $40 million in revenue between the two big departments, but much more from smaller, and also from smaller departments. But customs sometimes pays in $30-35 million a month. GST about the same amount, and quite frankly, the collections are way down. Like, economic activity has stopped, and also combined with the shutdown, there's very little going on, and quite frankly, we would be lucky to get a quarter of what we get in a typical month, and we just don't know how long this will last.
Is the government broke?
which government is that, in the Caribbean, maybe apart from Trinidad, is not broke at the moment? What I'm saying is the government has a few reserves, but the problem is, do you spend it all now? Or do you wait and see how long the storm will last?
Revenues to government coffers have been shrinking due to COVID-19 and the state of emergency. World oil prices continue to fall, dipping below $30 a barrel. But despite falling world oil prices, here in Belize, consumers are paying more than $10 a gallon. Premium gasoline sells at $10.92, while regular and diesel are currently being sold at $10.23 and $8.25, respectively. Those high prices are expected to decrease substantially, says Financial Secretary Joseph Waite.
We expect the prices, in fact, we know the prices are going to go down very sharply later this week. But the problem is that there's inventories, and the inventories have to be first used. And quite frankly, there's very little consumption happening at the moment. The gas stations are, I've heard from Esso and Puma and others who import that, again, we're off almost by 70% of sales. So the fact is that we first need to use out the old, more expensive stock, and that will happen in a few more days, I think. And later this week, we expect to see a fairly substantial fall in the price of gasoline.
And back to today's Ask the Expert session. Director of Health Services, Dr. Marvin Manzanero, was asked about the possibility of Belize using rapid tests, as well as those that test for antibodies. Here's what he shared about using those tests to test for COVID-19 in Belize.
Has the MOH considered introducing the approved FDA rapid tests in Belize? Yes, once they are FDA approved. What we have been discussing, and this morning that has been a topic of discussion, because people are asking us, are you going to be using the test that tests for antibodies? Even if we introduce that, that's not something that you routinely would introduce at this point in time, because that means that you have to wait for somebody to have developed antibodies, and that is not necessarily going to detect active infection, because not everybody develops antibodies at the same point in time. So that's not a routine test. As I said earlier, the gold standard for detecting SARS-CoV-2 is still going to be PCR testing, which is what we are doing. If we introduce antibody testing, which is a blood test that tries to find out if you have any antibodies against the virus, that can only be done as a parallel test to the PCR, but it's not one replacing the other. Our idea is that after maybe between 6 to 8 weeks, when there's more FDA approved test kits for them to be sold outside of the US, FDA and WHO approved test kits, we would move to that, and we would keep still the PCR testing in country. I mean, that is something we are looking at, yes, but for now it's the PCR testing that is the gold standard.
One country that has been hailed to have successfully contained the virus is Taiwan. Today, Taiwan reported no new cases of COVID-19 for the first time in 36 days. According to media reports, Taiwan has reported only 393 infections in total, with most of the cases being locally transmitted and only 6 deaths. Taiwan's success is hailed largely in part to early action on testing, tracing, and risk analysis using big data analytics and isolating cases. According to Dr. Manzanero, Belize is learning from Taiwan's best practices in management of COVID-19. He explains.
We have actually had 2 experience sharing activities with Taiwan, and there's going to be one at 7 p.m. tonight, where 3 of our doctors are going to be participating to look at best practices. We are aware of what Taiwan has been doing. Their quarantine measures have been strictly enforced. I was reading some of it before I came on board as well, and 2 of the items that they clearly articulated is the use of their people's mobile devices to keep a tracking of those who are supposed to be under quarantine. And some people were given a device, an electronic device, so that if you break that, then there's a heavy penalty, legal penalty, if people break that quarantine measure. Those are, other than the social distancing and the close following up of those potential suspect cases. That seems to be their situation.
After the break, the Director of Health Services explains the rejected kits from South Korea. Since the Ministry of Health began screening and testing exercises in detection of COVID-19, a total of 600 tests have been conducted. That was out of a diminishing number of kits that were available locally. While additional kits will be procured from the Cayman Islands, Director of Health Services Dr. Marvin Manzanero reported earlier today that another 11,500 kits would be arriving in country by day's end.
So where are we at the moment in terms of procurement of test kits, and where are we insofar as the number of tests that have been conducted using what we have in stock?
We are almost at 600 tests conducted. In one day, recall, we did up to 102, and Friday, Saturday, we actually went into 3 different batches trying to get close contacts, healthcare workers of patient number 10. As I understand it, there will be arrival of further testing kits today with the Amerijet flight. So at the end of the day, I should be able to tell you how many testing kits we have. We did get a note from PAHO that they were in the process of procuring 11,500 individual tests to be for us to use in Belize.
When pressed about the 25,000 kits that were being donated by South Korea through SICA that the Ministry of Health declined in March, the DHS said that the ministry's lab technicians are trained in administering tests using kits that were approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration.
remember, once you're getting a test into any given country, you have to find out whether it's been validated, whether it's been approved for use, whether you have the in-country capacity, and if you don't, if you have to buy a machine for it. If you buy the machine, then do you have the in-country capacity to service, maintain it, get parts, in terms of having a machine? The platform that we have is a PCR
Yes.
machine. Staff went to be trained on that specific platform. It is something that is routinely maintained in tandem with CDC. We get technical support from PAHO in that regard. So whenever any offer comes to us, we still will ask our counterparts both at the CARFA level, at PAHO level, to see whether this is something that can be used, so that it's not only the staff from here that tells us whether it can happen or not.
There have been over 500 persons and counting arrested for violating the emergency powers regulation with respect to the state of emergency and curfew. On Sunday, further restrictions were put in place in terms of movement of persons, and there were a number of persons who were caught in the net. A total of 94 persons were arrested and charged countrywide for various offenses under the emergency powers regulations. Commissioner of Police Chester Williams reports that for the charge of movement outside of curfew on a Sunday, 67 persons were arrested. 21 were unable to provide reasons for movement outside of curfew period, while 6 were in breach of curfew. Additionally, 9 persons were summoned for the offense of unable to provide reasons for movement outside of the curfew period in San Ignacio, and 1 person was arrested and charged for spreading false news. That arrest is in reference to Jose Espat, who police believe spread false information on Facebook. While there are a number of arrests that were made over the weekend for violators of the state of emergency, police are investigating a case of sudden death in the West. Earlier today, the decomposing body of an elderly man was found near a dump site in the Valley of Peace Village in Cayo District. According to information reaching the newsroom, the deceased has been identified as Pedro Fuentes, a Salvadoran national believed to be in his early 70s. Reports are that Fuentes worked at the dump site and that on Monday he left his house in the village to go to work. He did not return home and was later discovered dead. We're told that there were no visible signs of injuries on the body, and it is being treated at this time as a sudden death. There's much more news after the break, so stay tuned. 3 police officers, including a corporal, have been arrested and charged following the coercion of 2 Belize City residents into a sexual act last Tuesday. 46-year-old Jason Shaw, 38-year-old Leslie Martinez, and 20-year-old Anthony Villamil were arraigned earlier today for the crime of willful oppression. That's because a report was filed by a 45-year-old laborer in which he alleges that the trio of officers forced him and a female companion into having sex when they were seen inside an abandoned building on Central American Boulevard. One of the officers had a phone in his hand and purportedly told him to finish. The man reported that he went behind the woman and pretended to have intercourse. The revolting episode was recorded and disseminated on social media, prompting Commissioner of Police Chester Williams to take disciplinary action against the officers internally. They appeared in the Belize City Magistrates Court today, where they were granted bail of $1,000 plus 1 surety of the same amount. Earlier, we reported that the KHMHA Workers Union reached an agreement on some areas during a meeting with the Prime Minister. Among the other complaints over COVID-19 that have surfaced includes one from the Belize Medical and Dental Association, which states it has been excluded from meetings. According to the association, this is a form of victimization since they have been vocal about certain concerns. It cites a virtual task force meeting on April 8th from which they were locked out. The BMD further states that, quote, "The leaders of the country do not appreciate constructive criticism, and everything is micromanaged by a small group of individuals," unquote. The concern was addressed during today's Ask the Experts session this afternoon. Director of Health Services Marvin Manzanero said the following.
The current lockdown, I know, is going to be at least until the end of next week. I did read it. I don't know that to voice my personal or professional opinion on the matter. Not at this point in time. I would have had a discussion with Dr. Mogale in reference to that because he is the president of the BMDA. I don't know also that I know we had a virtual meeting last week, Thursday. We did not send the invitation for the actual meeting. We participated in the meeting. I don't know why he would have been boxed out. As a matter of fact, we had a very candid discussion on Wednesday morning with Dr. Mogale, and I gave him my assurance that as far as I know, nobody was going to be blocking any BMDA member from participating in the discussions we have. And as far as I know, my desk has never blocked any BMDA member in terms of their notes or guidance or information that they are willing to share with us. So how that came about, I can't voice an opinion other than that. I think we have an open channel of discussion with the BMDA executive, and Dr. Mogale knows very well how he can reach me in that regard.
At least 3 countries in the region, Cayman Islands, Bahamas, and Barbados, have complained that equipment placed on order for the COVID-19 pandemic were prevented by the U.S. authorities. The 3 countries had container loads of personal protective equipment purchased from U.S. vendors blocked from entering their territories by U.S. Customs and Border Protection. A spokesperson from U.S. Customs and Border Protection has confirmed to U.S. media that the agency is working with Federal Emergency Management Agency to prevent distributors from diverting personal protective equipment such as face masks and gloves, as well as ventilators. Dr. Manzanero says delivery of certain equipment was caught in the U.S. measures.
Additional ventilators have arrived. 8 have arrived. 6 were deployed to Carthusia. 2 are here at the warehouse here in Balmapan for deployment wherever they are needed. We are aware that the U.S. has put up place policy that restricts exportation of PPEs and items needed to combat COVID-19. Has this affected us in any way? Yes, there was a delay in the ventilators getting here, and that is causing a further delay in further ventilators getting here. Just before I came here, I'm being told that some masks that were initially due to come here, there might be a delay in terms of when they actually get here. So we're looking at avenues of where we can reroute items that will be coming routinely through the U.S. so that they can get here in the time that they are needed. We are not only sourcing outside, only from the U.S. We outsource from Central America, Mexico, China as well.
The National Association of Village Councils is demanding that village councils be included in the distribution of food under the COVID-19 assistance programs. Sabita says that villages and communities are clamoring for help that is taking too long to reach them. He says that he and other chairpersons have received an overwhelming number of calls from persons living in the rural areas who have not been able to get help. Today, he says that the government's efforts lack organization and calls for the inclusion of village councils to get things moving. Over the weekend, NAVCO issued a press release and addressed a letter to the CEO of Human Development, Judith Alpuche, to which she hasn't yet responded. He noted that his letter was acknowledged by Minister Carla Barnett and another representative of the Ministry of Local Government.
As you know that we cover rural communities, we are more than 50% of the population of this country. And we are over 200 villages and communities in Belize. And we are the majority, Ms. Polanco. And I believe that we need to be heard and we need to be respected as well. And that's why we at NAVCO demand that chairpersons countrywide be taken into consideration by being part of the team when providing food assistance for rural communities. Chairpersons were elected by the majority of the people in their villages and communities. Secondly, the chairperson of each village knows the people living there. And thirdly, they know the most needed ones. They know that the people that really need, especially the elderly and the most vulnerable ones. So that's why we're demanding that our chairpersons be taken into consideration whenever they're providing food assistance or any government department. For example, NEMO, Human Development, or Ministry of Health, or whosoever, that our chairpersons be contacted. We do not agree on the process they go about by getting this food assistance. Remember, we are facing a world pandemic. We are facing a national crisis. And we cannot put our people into process, getting IDs, number of IDs, and where you work and this and that. Remember, most of our people need that food assistance. Remember, Corozal Prison shut down like almost a month ago. The tourism sector closed a month ago also. Remember, all those people who were living, they were getting a minimum salary, especially the ones at the free zone. And up to 1 month, they do not have to sustain their families. And most of them are the breadwinners of the family. And we at NAVCO demand that this process be as fast as possible. Because, like I was in a talk show this morning, and I mentioned that government needs to get its act together and get more organized. I think they are lacking organization. Because up to today, I called Human Development, and up to today, they said they haven't started with the distribution of the food assistance. This is really ridiculous. We are in a national crisis.
Here at News 5, we have tried reaching Alpuche over a week and a half ago to get an update on how the food assistance, pantry, and boost programs are working during this time. But our requests for interviews have gone unanswered. We reached out again today, but we still haven't heard back. If you're frustrated by all the new regulations being introduced, including social distancing and other precautionary measures, you might want to buckle down and hang in there. During today's Ask the Experts online session, Dr. Manzanero says that it is very likely that we'll have to get used to some of these measures, perhaps for as long as a year or so. He explains that life may not go back to normal for a while, perhaps until a vaccine is available. Here's how he explained to one viewer who wanted to know for how long the measures will be around.
For the end of the month. But that's simply just for us to be able to get a grasp of the total amount of cases. I don't know that we will have an immediate reopening recommendation from our end. And even if there is, you will understand that life will not be the norm. I mean, whatever we had as a norm is not going to be the norm as we move along. We more than likely, all the little lines that we have to now make to go to the supermarket, to go anywhere, those will have to continue to remain because COVID-19 is here to stay. So even if our numbers, our curve flattens and starts to decrease, once everything goes to being back more or less where we were, those elements of social distancing are going to remain. I don't see that those are going to go away until you find a cure or if there's an effective vaccine for COVID-19. So you will look at the literature talking about at minimum 12 months, at maximum 18 months of establishing new norms of where we are going to go.
Coming up after the break, organizations are stepping up to assist with food programs. We'll tell you what the Salvation Army is doing. There are several food pantry programs in place by government agencies as well as individuals and humanitarian organizations across the country. The Salvation Army, which caters to thousands of persons, including families, the elderly, and children, has also been providing an essential service during the COVID-19 crisis. Today we stopped by the headquarters on Regent Street, where the team had been preparing for the delivery of pantry later this week. And as we found out, even as the Salvation Army has a list of clients that it caters to, it has had to expand to include others who stop by their facilities across the city looking for assistance.
We have two pantries, Oleander and Regent Street. What we are doing is still serving people in the regular way because we had the highest amount of clients in the pantry program. And we had a little problem receiving supplies, but now that is working out, and I'm quite happy about that. And as the government, as the Ministry of Human Development and Social Transformation has come up with a new food assistance program, we're actually not really a part of that program. We're still catering to our pantry clients, which is a whole heap. There's some confusion, but I know people should be looking at the numbers that the ministry put out there. There's a distinction between our regular pantry and that program. We are assisting, especially now, the regular clients, and we have a broad base of clients. And the ministry is working with them, with our clients, to offer that the package to them complimentary. That is our clients. Every pantry now is offering to the clients complimentary for this period. They have waived the $12 fee. People are looking forward to help us. Some people call us on the phone and they say, okay, I have some packages, I want you to look for some needy people. And we have partnered with 2 groups like that last week. Because we know that we still have some vulnerable seniors, and I try to get out to them. We still have continued our monthly package to seniors. Is another thing that we do internally. A set of clients, senior citizens that we manage, that really can't do much for themselves. We help them out too.
The Salvation Army also provides shelter for a number of persons, primarily women and men who are without a roof over their heads. Even with the COVID-19 crisis, their services remain active and more so, but there are precautionary measures in place to protect not only the staff, but the people they serve.
We serve the public in a variety of ways. First of all, let me talk about the institutions. There is the Gans Rest Home, that's for ladies, and there is the Raymond Parks Night Shelter, that is for men. We have taken in some of the people off the street, and the men, and we also are, so that shelter is still in operation, and so our staff they're working, and I must say, the men have been cooperating quite well, and I appreciate that. So the shelter is going. That hasn't closed. The 2 shelters. We also partnering with some other agencies that deal with shelters and the homeless. With the temporary shelter that has been opened for the homeless. MCC grounds. Yes, MCC grounds. So we help there with feeding, and also, just passing by and greeting the guys because we actually know them from off the street. So it's good seeing our clients in different ways. So that's 2 aspects. The third is the pantry. The pantry has remained open, but for safety reasons and health, I minimize the hours, or reduce the hours from 9 till 12. All of our employees are on the front line. And because of that, I'm very concerned about the exposure to them. So the public can pray for us. That's one thing. And the clients, when they come, you who are coming to the pantry, please respect the boundaries, please respect the social distancing, and we will take care of you.
Over 7,000 applications out of 60,000 plus have been approved for the COVID-19 Unemployment Relief Program. While that is one aid that is being dispersed, other help is available. Those persons who are recipients of the food pantry and boost programs are still receiving assistance during this time, and food pantry recipients are not being required to pay the usual $12. Aside from the Salvation Army's food program, the food pantry distribution locations such as Wellworth and downtown Belize City are also busy. Their recipients of the program received food items valued at around $109. We spoke with Dinesh Bhojwani of Wellworth about the assistance being given and what the public can expect when accessing the program.
We were basically sent a list of individuals. All the vetting gets done by the Ministry of Human Development through the Human Services Department. And then they've basically showed up, given us their IDs. We've cross-checked it and provided the packages for them. Everybody needs, there are some numbers that were given out and are on Facebook, and the government has disseminated this information through other social media platforms. So we ask that you call, and until you're given an actual approval and a number, because we don't make that approval. That is not our decision to make who gets it, who doesn't. That's with the ministry. And then once you have that, you can come in. I ask that you don't rush in, because there's plenty. And so if you want to come and wait in line, that's I wouldn't advise it, because obviously under the current situation with social distancing. So we will be here all week. The food products will be here all week. So there's no need to really rush. My suggestion is kind of come at different times, so we don't have. And you can call the phone number. The store is 227-3400, and we could probably give you a time that we feel will be best suited for you to come in, and where you'll have almost zero wait time. Once they enter the store, it's fairly short. What we did was this morning, because it was sort of the first day, there was a little bit of a sort of normalizing of the process. So now, going forward, I think by later today and during the course of the week, the wait time won't be as much, because the packages will be ready for them to just sort of pick up and walk away.
Mr. Bhojwani, are you able to share with us what these packages contain? Like, what are some?
Sure. Yeah. There's all the essentials. There's rice, flour, sugar, beans. There's cleaning products. There's soap powder, soap, Clorox, fruits and vegetables. There's chicken.
For more information on how to access these aids, you can find all the details on the Ministry of Human Development's Facebook page. And that's the news. Don't forget that tonight's broadcast is available in both text and streaming video at channel5belize.com. You can also connect with us on our Facebook page at facebook.com/News5Live. I'm Marlene Cuellar. Thanks for joining us. And from all of us here at News 5, please remember to wash your hands, keep your social distance, stay at home, and stay safe. Good night.